and welcome everybody to this week's Leadership Roundtable. So every week we talk about a little aspect of humanizing transformation. So we're probably all in some way, shape or form in the world of change or transformation, whether that is as a practitioner in projects, technology, organizational design, learning and development, or just really curious as a modern leader. All of that stuff, everybody is welcome. And what I wanted to do today is something really interesting. I wanted to just open up a conversation that I tend to have so often with transformation practitioners and leaders, which is the idea of there are two really big blockers, human blockers to the success around transformation and change. Whereas more often than not, we feel or we think that there is just one big blocker. And what I wanted to do today was just to really sort of deep dive into one particular human blocker that is the one that we don't necessarily talk so much about. So I don't know whether any of you are following me on LinkedIn, but if I was to ask the question of anybody and pop it into the chat or come off mic, what do you think those two kind of big human blockers might be? What's coming up for you? What do you think are the big human blockers to success when it comes to change and transformation? Just keep that in your head. Just be thinking about it. Pop it into the chat as I go along. Nice little quote for us to get into the sort of juicy bit around human change and transformation. A lovely quote here from Andy Law: unless you're prepared to give up something valuable, you really will never be able to truly change at all, because really it's about giving up to receive, isn't it? So it's quite an interesting quote. So there's something for us to reflect upon to get us into that frame of mind. What I do want to say is this, and I've just come off a call with a group of our trainee practitioners, and we've been talking about the world that we live in at the moment, and how yes, the only thing that's constant is change. But we were talking about what does that mean, and what is unique about the world that we're living in at the moment, and how does that relate to the projects and programs that we're working on our own modern leadership profile. And we talked about these three tenets, and these three tenets, for those of you that know top and tail the Dilyn Way framework, and the Dilyn Way framework is everything that we believe in. It's our philosophy, it's our methodology and approach for humanizing transformation. But these three things here are really important, because we want to be able to become digitally transforming individuals. And it's as leaders, as human systems, also as practitioners. One of the conversations that I've just had with the practitioners was how some of us get so incredibly purist and wedded to a particular methodology and our model, and we can't kind of let go of it. And we can't seem to go, right, okay, well, ProSci might not work necessarily for this particular customer, and it's just, how do we navigate it? Is this really kind of like agile? Is this Scrum that we need to be doing here? And just thinking about that. So what we want to be doing is we want to be really focusing more on how do we become an individual that can evolve and adapt. And that's also the toolkits that we use. And also that human-centeredness. We all know that safety and well-being is coming into play. We all know that our organizational structures are starting to crumble. Even if we're working in public sector, it's still, we can see the chinks in the armor already. And whilst policymakers and politicians and senior leaders might not be able to embrace that for what we're going to talk about today, it's still a reality, and it's there. And there's things like Semco style that are starting to emerge that have got fluidity in them, and really talk about that networked ecosystem, but without losing the control. Like holacracy and sociocracy kind of lose control on those methods and models. Semco is giving us a little bit of a promise for a future that we can be fluid, more networked without losing control. And then the regenerative bit is like, oh my goodness, ethical inquiry, ethical critical questioning and ethical decision making, root cause, where is the origin story of this data, and sustainability. You know, active sustainability as opposed to just awareness, I think is really important. You know, we talked about how you know, ESGs and sustainability in terms of climate, it's no longer just a thing to be aware of, is it? We all have to think about how are we actively demonstrating that in our own practice, and most importantly within change and transformation. So there's a huge amount going on at the moment that is really expanding the complexity of change and transformation beyond our systems. It's not just the organization, the sector, or the community that and the users impacted. It's way beyond that. So there's so much going on at the moment that we need to be aware of, which brings me to, you know, how do we make sense of it? And the way that we're able to make sense of the change around us is to use little models like the Kegan model. And this is the Kegan model. The attribution is not on the slide, but the attribution is in the notes section of this slide. If you haven't come across the Kegan model, we've got a great masterclass in our community, free to join. All masterclasses are free. And there's a gentleman called Tom Stiles, and he gives a brilliant masterclass on the Kegan model. He makes it really simple. He gives great examples. So if you've never come across it, if you're in the world of change and transformation, if you're a modern leader, if you fancy yourself as a role model, this is a brilliant thing for you to get to know. The reason why I've popped this in here to talk about these two big blockers of human change today is this. There's stuff bubbling up in the ether. We have probably talked about being in the complicated, the top right-hand space for a long time, which is we can identify our problem, we can identify the issues, but we're not too sure how to navigate our way there. So we'll iterate and we'll discover along the way. However, what's bubbling up in the ether now, globally around change and transformation, thinking about the macro view of climate change and economics and all of that stuff, and, you know, Brexit and pandemics, is that actually is the reality that we're more in a complex or chaotic environment? Are we in our, you know, otherwise simple projects and programs, are we navigating humans that in a way that, you know, we're in complex, we're in chaos? I'm putting that out there. I know that's not what today is all about, but I do think it's important for us to be aware that there is shift happening. And the shift from complicated to complex and chaos changes how we design our projects and programs, changes how we engage with the humans. That's the reason why I've popped that in there. So really, really interesting stuff. If you'd like to know more about that, just pop it into the chat, let me know. But go into the Leading 4D community and have a look at Tom's masterclass on the Kegan model. So here we go. These are the two big blockers. These are the two biggest blockers to human change. People that resist change and people who have built an immunity to it. So, quick question. How many people are familiar with resistance to change? Put a hand up, nodding head. Yeah. How many people are familiar with immunity to change, when people around us have built an immunity to change? Brilliant. Ravi has. Fantastic. So Ravi, if there's anything that you want to add into what I'm about to share with everybody, then please do, because it's a really, really important thing. The key thing here is resistance to change is where we've got people in the system that don't want it. You know, just like that quote at the start said, I don't want that change because I'm going to lose something. I don't want that change because I don't like it. I don't want that change because it's going to change my lovely little world over here and everything's all right, Jack, over here. Why would I want that? Resistance, resistance, resistance. There's huge amounts of things that we can use to support and reduce that resistance. And I want to share two formulas today on that. But the second one that we are seeing increasingly and seeing it almost stop in some cases the progress and success of change and transformation is this immunity to change on the right hand side. So what do I mean when I say immunity to change? And that's the thing that I really want to get into today, in today's session. When we have immunity to change, we genuinely, really genuinely believe in the change. We want it. We agree with it. We think it's going to be absolutely wonderful on the other side of the fence. We can see the greener grass. But we don't manifest any change in ourselves. So you've got, agreement coming from the business, and you're thinking, this is fantastic. This change and transformation project is going to be bloody brilliant. But then, and you give loads of tools, and you talk, and you do loads of brainstorming workshops, and you give, and you deploy the technology, and then 3 months and 6 months and 9 months down the track, even those people that agreed with it and were on side with you aren't engaging in change. You can't see any change in them. Yeah.
Hello, yeah. I mean, I kind of thought that, I wasn't quite clear on what you meant by that, but I kind of thought that's what you meant. But in that I've seen with some people, they recognize that where they're, or with some teams or some business, they recognize that where they are is not right, and they have to be in a different place. But when you start talking about being in a different place, the fear of that journey becomes overwhelming, and they start defending why they are where they're at the moment.
Yeah.
So why we are, so we kind of want to be here.
Yeah.
Because it looks very fearful to make that journey. There's so much change involved that let's stay here. So you don't know, at any one time in the day they'll speak a different language. So at one point it might be, yes, we know we have to change, and then the next hour will be, well, actually we're here because this happened and that happened, and that's why we're here, and we're kind of comfortable being here right now.
Yeah.
And it's quite confusing dealing with that, I think.
Oh, Ravi, absolutely. And you can see the interplay to these two things, isn't it? I mean, at the moment, what we're all doing is we're looking at a slide and we're seeing two boxes. So they look like two completely separate things, but they're so they play into each other, and sometimes you might think that you're dealing with resistance to change, but if you have some conversations, or if you observe the behavior and the actions of the individual, you might actually recognize that there's an immunity to change there. So it's really important for all of us as modern leaders and practitioners of transformation and change to really understand the difference between these two things, so that we then are able to navigate which one are we dealing with here. And so super, super, super important. What I do want to do is just to begin with, and I think the resistance to change is something that is more established. There are lots of, we've got things like ProSci and the ADCAM model. We've got lots of change methods and models out there that we can use to support people with resistance to change. And even, more traditional coaching can also support people that have a resistance, because it allows them to go deep and self-discover and et cetera, and, things like techniques like appreciative inquiry. But what you can see here on the slide is really, is really powerful for me. The top formula is what is considered the original formula that we should be using to understand how we can actually dumb down that resistance to decrease that resistance. And then there is another formula that kind of evolved out of it, which is Kathleen Dannemiller's formula. So I just want to talk to these very, very briefly. I don't know how many of you have ever come across these, but in the way that you think about change and transformation, and perhaps how you structure some of your conversations, if it's resistance to change that you think you're coming up against, then these are some of the things that you can do. So Gleicher's simple formula says that if we are able to get people to just get it out of your head, get it out of your heart, get it on the table. What's not working at the moment? Get people to really understand what's not working, so that you are building an energy of dissatisfaction with the current state, right? If you're able to do that, if you're able to increase the energy around dissatisfaction, the understanding and the intelligence, the cognition that there's dissatisfaction here, and that's really important. The next thing is clarity of vision. Is there an absolute clarity of where we should be in the future? Is vision something that we can visualize? Do you know, I say that to so many of my customers. Is the vision something that you can visualize? And more often than not, I just get this kind of like a sound of silence. It's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, can you actually visualize it? And it's really important. So can we visualize the vision as opposed to, is it clearly defined in a narrative? Pooh, get that to one side. Let's really visualize it. And the other thing is concrete first steps. Tiny, tiny, concrete first steps. Can everybody see the one thing that they can do? Can the team see the one thing that they can do? Can the organization see the first few measures of this? So concrete steps, visually action steps, and impact measurement in the first concrete steps. If we've got those three states in, that we've really, really built that sense of dissatisfaction with the current state, we are genuinely able to visualize the vision. And we've got that sense of, you know, really open and transparent first concrete steps, actions that we're taking or that you can take, and the impact of them and how they're being measured, and that being transparent and open. Then that says that that formula will reduce resistance to change. Will reduce resistance to change. And I think that's fantastic. The other way round is when Kathleen, basically Dana Miller in her work, said change equals. If you want a system to change, if you are leading or operating or managing change, then actually the formula becomes change equals these things. So it's just a slightly different way of looking at the two formulas. Really interesting. Has anybody come across that before? These two formulas? No, and do you know what I like? The thing that I like about these is it's so obvious, isn't it? It's so obvious and just beautiful, because this is human, right? These are human elements. And so often, and Ravi, you will know this from past conversations that you've heard me have, but the vision piece, that, you know, a vision does not capture the heart of the human. It just doesn't. Strategies and visions are built for the organization. Strategies and visions were orchestrated and created for target operating models and organizational structures. They were never created to engage the humans. It's only in latter years that we've wanted to share vision and strategy with the workforce, thinking that if we do that, it'll bring them on the journey. You know, visions and strategies, when they were created back in the day in the industrial era, were just for the people right at the very top to understand what they needed to do for these factory minions. You know, we didn't have machines in those days, we just had human robots. So they didn't need to know all of that stuff. It was just for structure and organization. So we need to think about that a little bit differently now. So thinking about how we can humanize vision and strategy, super, super important. But that's probably for another weekly moment. So these two formulas really help us with that kind of resistance to change. But what about immunity to change? And this is what I really want to get into today. And I'm going to share a brief extract of a video with you. And the immunity to change concept was researched and continues to be researched by a guy called Robert Kegan and his partner researcher, a lady called Lahey. And both Kegan and Lahey have been working in the private sector at a personal human level, as well as an organizational, corporate and government level on this concept of immunity to change. So I'm just going to share this with you. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the model, because that's really what today is all about. So very briefly.
You know, my colleagues and I have been doing for now the last 20 years and thinking about change, but I thought as a way to get into it, I would start with a little math problem, since I come from a school of education, you know. So here's the problem. If 14 frogs sat on a log and 3 of them decided to jump into the water, how many frogs would be left on the log? Now, I know a big part of you wants to say 11 is the answer to that question, but I want to suggest to you that 14 might be a better answer, because there's a big difference between deciding to and actually doing it. And I think that is pretty much kind of what this whole talk is about. Kind of this mysterious kind of space between our actual intentions and what we are actually able to bring about. If at the beginning of the book, Immunity to Change, we quote this study from the health sector where we've ended up doing quite a lot of work, and it's a study that has now been replicated a few times and has a lot of different versions to it. But the one that we mentioned in the book is that if heart doctors tell their seriously at-risk heart patients that they are likely to literally die if they don't change their ways of living around diet, exercise, smoking, and the like, it still turns out that only 1 in 7 patients can actually make the changes. And
isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? And you just put that in a corporate human system that we're trying to navigate change and transformation. The genuine intention to change, but then the impact of reality, that change manifesting in that human being. Only 1 in 7 is likely to do it. And that 1 in 7 here is based on a life-threatening situation. You know, if you're in a corporate environment and you're not necessarily in a life-threatening situation, how many people that we're having conversations with that are saying, yeah, I love this change, this is what we need it, but are not engaging with it? That's a real sign for us that there might be an immunity to change with that individual. So the question then becomes, if we are able to identify that there is an immunity to change happening, as opposed to resistance to change, what do we do about it? And that's where this model comes into play. And I think the reason why the immunity to change model is super, super important to us in humanizing transformation and in the Dilyn way is because of this. The immunity to change model focuses on mindset transformation. If you identify that somebody intellectually gets it, they intellectually agree with it, and yet you can't see change in them, it's because it's invisible, it's deeply within their mindset. So we have to find a way to actually help them to transform the way that they think. And the immunity to change model, it does exactly that. It helps us to work with individuals and teams. And this is something that somebody was saying to me the other day. We were talking about the immunity to change model and we went through it. And a lady said to me, she said, "God, Mel, this sounds absolutely brilliant. Where did it come from? I love this model. I'm going to use it in my transformation, but I've got a big problem. I get that you can use it at an individual or a small group level, but what happens if the whole organization has got this immunity? Everybody's with me on this train, but nobody's making any change. How does this scale up?" Well, the great thing about it is that because the immunity to change model has been around now for a few decades, there are some fantastic case studies at an organizational level. So it does scale to organization. So if you feel that you've got kind of immunity to change en masse, then you can still use this model. There is a way to deploy it. So essentially, there are four stages to the immunity to change model. And each one of those stages is a column in a worksheet that I'm going to share with you all. And if you'd like to know more about the immunity to change model, what I'll be doing today as well is just sharing quite a lot of links. So we've got 4 or 5 very, very in-depth links that you can use so that you can go and explore this model for yourself. But the first stage, the first column is super important. And the reason why it's so important is it's where we identify what we want to change. So what is the goal? What is the improvement? What are we agreeing with that we're just not leaning into? So what is our brain, our mindset, what has our mind built an immunity towards, right? So that's what we're trying to understand. So what do I know is really good? I know that I want to lose weight and it's going to be good for me. I know, and I really want to. So that is what you're putting here, but I don't seem to be able to do it. So this first column is all about really understanding what's the thing that I want to do? What's the thing that I agree with doing, but my subconscious brain has built an immunity and it's not letting me do it. And that's what this is all about. My conscious brain is saying, this transformation is brilliant. But my unconscious brain is saying, oh, I'm not sure about that, Ravi. Oh, I'm not sure about that, Ravi. I think it's going to be a really, really bad thing for you. So do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stop you. I'm going to not let you go anywhere near that thing that your conscious brain is saying. So immunity to change is a fight between your conscious and your unconscious brain. That's the way to look at it. I intellectually get it, and I'm really motivated to do it, but I still don't do it. Why is that? Because your unconscious brain has said, oh, I don't think so. And you just want to deal with it. So super, super important. And because we're talking about the unconscious brain, that means that we need to think about pre-work. We need to think about what's manifesting. Some of the things that are really important about this first column when we're identifying the change that we really want to be a part of, that we really want to engage with, is making sure that we recognize it's not negative, right? We don't put it in there as something that we want to stop doing. It's something that we want to release. We want to make it positive, and we also want to make it identity driven. So the first column is really about, what is the thing that I really want to change? I intellectually get it. What's the goal? What's the improvement that I'm really into, that I really want to engage with, but I just can't get there? And then what we do is we head to the second stage once we've got to that first stage. And the second stage is really interesting, because the second stage is where we then go into full-blown observation, right? We're not analyzing here, we're observing. All we're doing is observing. So, I know exercise is really good for me. I know it's really good for me. And I know that it's going to make me healthier. So I'm going to go to the gym. That's my improvement goal. And I'm committed to going to the gym. And I pay for 12 months gym membership. But at 2 or 3 months down the track, I'm not going to the gym. What am I doing? This is what you do here in column 2. What are the thoughts and the behaviors and the actions that are manifesting that are stopping you do that? Yeah, but it's too cold outside. And actually, you know what? I need to get breakfast ready for the kids. And I haven't really quite got time. You're avoiding, right? So you're avoiding tactics, or you're putting other priorities in, you're diminutizing the priority of it. So all you want to do is just observe what you are doing and how you're behaving, which is the opposite to that goal in the first column. And this is brilliant when you work with leaders, by the way, around change and transformation. You get leaders and you have great conversations about vision and strategy and where we want to go to, and what do we need to do and who do we need to be, and they're all absolutely in it. And then they go back into their portfolio, into their lovely world, and you're kind of going, you were with me. You were with me. What's going on? And it's just helping them to observe the stuff that they are doing, which is in opposition to what they're cognitively and intelligently agreeing to, is brilliant. Because one of the big things for us, and I don't know about you, is when you're thinking about change and transformation, leaders need to walk the talk, right?
Sorry, Mel, I have to go. I'm ever so sorry, but I'd love to catch up.
Right. Absolutely, no problem at all. You take care, have a great day. Leaders have to walk the talk, because culture shifts by looking up. And if the organizational system looks up and doesn't see any shift in the leaders, but the leaders are talking about the shift, it's a disconnect. It's a complete disconnect. So there's no trust. There's no trust in me changing who I am, because I can't see any of that happening above me. So really, really important. So just observing the opposite behaviors to the intention that we want.
Mel, is this sort of tie in with the concept of conformity? Back in, say, 2008, when we had almost the entire world economy crash, if you looked at, say, investment banks, they'd be filled to the rafters with really capable, bright people, Oxford, Cambridge, Warwick University, educated, whatever, who would probably have known that there's lots of bad debt sitting on the balance sheets of companies. But yet people don't seem to want to step outside the line and raise their hands, because it draws attention to themselves. And therefore they conform to what the leaders expect of them or want to do, and then everyone's doing it and going in a really bad direction. Is this kind of related to that?
Absolutely, Ravi, absolutely. What you've done there is you have described a manifestation of immunity to change. The interesting thing about it is that just identifying this bit here, observing the opposite behavior, you know, so you see people following, you see people being silent, you see people stepping back and not speaking up. That stuff here is only the surface. What we need to do is we need to go into the mindset to transform it. And that is, you know, there's no other model that really does it as powerfully as this immunity to change model. It isn't a complicated model to get your head around, but once you get your head around this model, i.e. use it on yourself first, it's the easiest model to work with others on. It really, really is. But this is the bit, if you think about what you've just talked about, this is the bit that is where we start to get exciting. It starts to get exciting, because in the third column, what we're starting to do is, for the first time, we are starting to visualize and understand the immunity we have to the change. So in column 1, this is what I want. This is the improvement. This is the goal. This is intellectually what I get. Column 2, these are the behaviors and the words and the actions that are manifesting. You're not analyzing, but here you start to ask why. Why am I doing that? Why am I saying that? How does it feel to me? What's going on? And this is what, you know, what they call, you start with a worry box. These are the kind of really uncomfortable feelings that come up for us. Well, I might lose my job. You know, I might lose all my mates. They won't want anything to do with me. I won't get the promotion. So that's that. You're asking why, you're asking why, you're asking why. Now, a lot of people will think, brilliant. So immunity to change, identified, fantastic. But you haven't yet identified the immunity to change. What you need to do is you also need to go into the final column. And the final column is where you go to the root, the origin mindset, the Neanderthal belief that is driving these feelings, that are driving column 2 behaviors and actions that are stopping you from engaging with the goal and the improvement in column 1. So that it's incredibly important to not go from column 1 straight into, why am I doing this? We need to follow. And it's interesting because the immunity to change research over the last few decades has absolutely gone through failure and success. And going through failure and success, they have understood that we have to go column 1, column 2, column 3, and column 4. We can't jump any of the columns. We've got to work our way through them. So what I'd like to do now, before I talk about column 4, is I would like to just take us through a very, very simple couple of examples of really going and understanding immunity to change. And for everybody in the call today, what I've got here is I've got an example that is a corporate example, and I've got an example that is a personal example. So in the corporate example, which is the first one, you can see here that this individual wants to be more direct in terms of the way that they speak truth with others. So essentially, they want to be more authentic. They want to show, you know, their real, their constructive feedback and engagement with others. So that's what they want to do, right? And they know, as part of the new Teams deployment and, you know, all of this wonderful platform, you know, platform technology that's coming into the organization, that being able to be more conversational and be more kind of constructive, I'll be able to do that. So I get that this is a really, really good thing for me to do. Or potentially in a personal environment, you know, you might really genuinely want your kids to be as independent and as strong, you know, that to be their own person and not using that word that you used just then, Ravi, to conform. So you've got 2 cognitive, motivational goals or improvement elements that, you know, that this individual might have, one corporate and one personal. How do we go about understanding this? Well, column 2, if you remember, I said it's observation. All you want to do in column 2 is observe what you are saying, how you're saying it, what you are doing and how you are doing it, which is the complete opposite to the goal or the improvement. So in column 2, it's you just want to observe what you're doing, which is the opposite to that. When I am in a situation where I can and should give constructive feedback, what do I do and say? That's all you want. Don't analyze it. Don't question it. Just don't even explain it. Don't try and explain it. Just put it down. And look at what we've got here. I soften the message when I'm sharing with others. And actually, you know, I've worked through this immunity to change myself. I don't want to create discomfort in myself because it makes me feel, you know, I agree with, I just go into agreement, you know, and all of these things you can imagine that we can see in others. So we might have conversations with leaders or team managers, and they might be saying constructive feedback is what we all need. And then you go into a one-to-one with them and you suddenly realize that actually they're not, they're in column 2. They've got an immunity to change. So it's really important for us to recognize that how does it manifest? How does the opposite of my goal? How does the opposite of the improvement? How does the opposite of what our leaders have absolutely are motivated behind, and they've said to us that they're united and they're going to be a part of it and they're going to help us? What is the opposite manifestation of their behavior? And then, and only then, do we want to look at this, which is why. Start to ask why. So here we can use the 5 whys. Why are we doing this? It's not quite broad yet. So it's the competing commitment, because I want to be liked, because I'm avoiding conflict. You can see this, can't you? You can see how this can be. So we want to be able to work with people to get them to work together so that they can ask the 5 whys to understand what are the competing commitments. Now that competing commitment is your unconscious brain. Your unconscious brain is saying, you need to be liked. And if you do that, you're not going to be liked. Your competing brain is saying, oh, you want to be a part of this team. And if you do that, what you're going to do is you're going to create conflict and they're not going to want anything to do with you. No, I'm going to protect you. I'm going to protect you. So that's what's happening here, right? So that your Neanderthal brain, your unconscious brain, is suddenly stronger than your intellectual brain, your conscious brain, because it's trying to protect you. And that's where this questioning of why starts to really have power. But it's not enough yet. Once we've done the 5 whys in the competing commitments, then what we want to do is we want to spread it out. And we want to have it, you know, we want to be in the world of inquiry. So what we want to say here is we want to say, so tell me more about that. You know, what does that look like? And what you're doing is, in the big assumption, you are getting to the root cause of what your Neanderthal brain, your unconscious brain, is the belief. You're getting to the root cause, the belief that's stopping, and the belief that is the immunity. That belief is the immunity to change, not the competing commitments and not the actions and behaviors. They're almost surface elements. The actual immunity to the change is the root cause, is the real belief at the origin of this story. And that's what the big assumption is. And the great thing about it is this: those of you that know our model, if you can get to that point of big assumption, what do? You can power up, or you can create habit canvases, because you have got something very specific to work towards here. You have got your improvement goal, and then you've got the challenges to put into your canvas. So you are able to minimum viably shift your own identity, your own belief system. And it's essentially a flow path. So it's a brilliant way of working on the depth of immunity to change. I have shared with everybody this model as well today, because I want everybody to be aware of how they can get hold of it. And this is the official immunity to change template, and you can use it yourself. You can digitize it. I absolutely recommend that every single individual creates an immunity to change, fills out a immunity to change model for their personal life, because it's really easy for us to come up with something. You know, we've all done New Year's resolutions and never been able to stick to them, you know, all that intention. Get one completed for yourself first, and then all of a sudden the power of using this in change and transformation to humanize it is amazing and so brilliant, because this then becomes step one to then changing the identity using the Dilyn Way framework, using the minimum viable shifts. So it's an absolutely fantastic model. And there are other models and methods that we use within the Dilyn Way framework, but the framework itself, of course, is quite all-encompassing. It's a philosophical framework, and it is available for everybody to become trained as a practitioner. And one of the things that we do within that training is we help you to understand what models and methods do align. You know, you are able to dance with the Dilyn Way, and equally, you know, able to work with you on perhaps, you know, if you feel that you've suddenly become quite purist as a Scrum Master, how we can kind of get you a little bit more adaptive and a little bit more open to other things as well. So that's some of the stuff that comes out of the Practitioner Academy. As always, it's a weekly webinar, it's a public arena. So I say to everybody that Thursday afternoons and Fridays for me are the time where I try and spend one-to-one conversations with people. If you would like to have a one-to-one conversation about who you are, where you're going, or a project or program that you're working on, with absolutely no commitments whatsoever, I would love to, because that's what I like doing on my Thursday afternoons and Fridays. But notwithstanding, just to bring today to a little bit of a summary, few things to remember. Start to become conscious of what's going on around you, right? When you're working on change, and it doesn't have to be in a project or program, it could just be daily life at work. But start to be aware of what's going on and thinking to yourself, is this resistance I'm feeling from this person? Or is it an immunity to change? Or think about it for yourself. What are you facing? Are you facing resistance or immunity? And now, as long as you can identify which one, you can do something about it. Really important that there's safety in numbers. So if you are within a project or a program, to socialize the concept of immunity to change out wide is really, really important. Really, really important, because you just get this groundswell. It's so incredibly valuable and powerful. And the third thing is leaders. And we don't want to knock leaders. You can't give leaders a hard time. You know, when you think about leadership development programs and the way that they've been designed and they're still being developed, and you think about MBAs that are out even the mini MBAs that are out in the marketplace, they're still behind the 8 ball. You know, they're starting to move, but they're still behind the 8 ball. So we've got to kind of give leaders a break in some way, shape or form. Notwithstanding, we still need these courageous conversations. We still need to ourselves be able to help them through either resistance or immunity to change. It's so incredibly important. So 2 very quick banana skins here. Number 1, assumption, because the assumption is that they're resisting change, but they may not be. So you want to just make sure that you don't say that person doesn't want the change, that person doesn't like the change, they were just paying lip service in that meeting. Let's not jump to assumption on that one. Really spend time to understand, is it resistance or is it immunity to change that we've got going on here? If you really want to humanize transformation and accelerate success, it's super powerful for you to identify one or the other. And the third thing for me the second thing for me, the final thing, is skimming over the hard stuff. Too many people that start to work on immunity to change tend to go from column 1 to column 4. You've got to go through the process. You've got to have the individual working through the process themselves, talking them through. We really want to be able to map this stuff. You can't skim over the hard stuff here. And if you remember the curve of human transformation, the first 3 stages you know, that there's barely any change at a behavioral level. There's barely any change at a mindset level. But as soon as you get to that activation, if you've done that groundwork, you know that you will very, very quickly kind of see that scale, that fast shift, that tipping point, and people will be able to just follow others on the journey. So, you know, try not to skim over the hard stuff, because your program director is saying deadline, budget, you know, reports, where are the results? We really need to understand the difference of human transformation versus projects and programs. And there we go, guys, the end of today's session. Couple of minutes over. I know we're 47 minutes over the hour, but there we go. I really would love to leave everybody with this provocation, right? Where do you think you've got an immunity to change in either work or life? And when we share the replay of today, we will also share a worksheet that you can have a go at it. If you'd like to know a little bit more, then please do let me know, because it's just so powerful as soon as you get into this world. And harking back to what Robert Kegan said at the start on that video, even when heart patients are told that without changing their lifestyle and exercise and health habits, they could get themselves into a grim life or death situation, 6 out of 7 will be back to their old ways within a 12-month period. So this brain, this unconscious brain, this Neanderthal brain is really powerful, and we need to start to understand it and start addressing it and managing it in change and transformation. For too many decades, we've focused on change management and the human side of transformation based on conscious brain, because it's the easy bit. But we now recognize, as the world of digital transformation is becoming trillion upon trillion upon trillion, the failure rate is not going down. The failure rate is either static or increasing. And it's because we need to now really address this unconscious element, the mindset. It's all about a mindset and identity. There we go. So that's the end of today's session. I'm going to just stop sharing, and I don't know whether there are any questions, but what I'll just quickly do is just stop the recording.